Hi, everybody. I'm Dr. Melody Bacon, a licensed clinical psychologist,
And I'm Ron Bacon, a licensed marriage and family therapist.
and we are part of Relationship Visions, which is our private practice. And we have this YouTube site, Relationship University, where we want to talk about anything that comes into our practice with regard to relationships. We work a lot with people in intimate romantic relationship issues. We have parents and kids and all the permutations of families. And over the last 20 plus years, we've seen lots of different repeating things come up that we thought we would share with you, and types of things that we talk about with our clients. So today I wanted to talk about the idea of being curious. We've talked about that before in some of our other videos, and we certainly have talked about it in our last two that were on conflict. And what does it mean to move toward your partner with curiosity?
Mhm.
And what does that look like? So we thought we would cover that a little bit today. And one of my favorite TV characters from up until the 90s was Columbo. He was a detective, and he was so good at remaining very calm and very kind, even while he was asking questions that were really pissing people off. Usually, the person he was most interested in as a suspect would eventually get very annoyed with him. And he never lost his cool, and yet persisted. In other words, he didn't stop asking questions, but he did regulate a bit to the timing, and he kind of knew he would come back again later. He didn't have to do everything in one sitting. So he's a good role model for those of us who are trying to do this with people with whom we are involved with intimately and often have a lot of feelings going on.
Mhm. Mhm. He's not a great role model for marriage, I don't think. What's his wife's name? Was
Mrs. Columbo.
That's right.
The joke is the whole all the years he was on, the running gag was trying to figure out what Mrs. Columbo's name was, and he never would. Somebody would ask him, and he would say Mrs. Columbo. So we don't know.
Yeah. So, but how he handled adversity, how he
Hmm.
handled criticism,
Hmm.
disdain,
Right.
all those things is a way. It's a nice model for how to remain curious and not get flustered,
Hmm.
not letting somebody else dictate how you're going to be.
Right. Yeah, that's a good point. So
Mhm.
we like to suggest that when you're going to be talking to your loved one about a topic that has already been difficult for
Mhm.
you, you've probably had several conversations about it, then you want to first begin by making sure that you are in a calm, non anxious state when you start, and that you don't come into the conversation with a pre existing agenda of trying to figure out a new way to get your partner to change their mind, do what you want, see things the way you do. This is not useful, and your partner picks up on it no
Mhm.
matter how nice you're being. And so the goal is to get some better understanding of what your partner is seeing or experiencing, or you know, what their objective is. All these things that you don't know because you're not understanding it, because you have a very clear idea of what you want, and your partner is in disagreement with you about
Mhm.
that.
So this is not about how to be more clever in your manipulations. I would say a manipulation is getting somebody to do something they might not do on their own,
Right,
but getting them to do something without them knowing you're doing it.
right.
That's a
Yeah.
manipulation. And
Mm-hmm.
that's not what we're advocating. We want marriage to be one where there's trust.
Mm-hmm.
So a person isn't having to be on guard saying, okay, what are they up to? Once, because people do figure out, hey, I got manipulated here.
Oh, yeah.
And that's why we often Well, when we had fairs, we're making this during the time of the shelter in place, COVID-19.
Uh-huh.
But the Orange County Fair, I mean, I like going there and watching the barkers and
Mm-hmm.
somebody who's very engaging. They will sell you stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's fun to watch people put kind of distance between them and somebody who's pretty good because they know they're vulnerable. They're
Yes.
going to get manipulated into doing something. And so now they're on to it. And you can expect, you don't want that in your relationship. You
Right.
don't want your partner backpedaling whenever you bring, hey, I want to
Yes.
talk to you.
Yeah, and you don't want them to think, "Oh my gosh, here we go again, another
Mhm.
2-hour harangue."
Well, that would
Um,
be a bad manipulator. That's just somebody who's going to beat down the door,
right.
So,
So the idea is to chunk it into steps. Of course, at some point, you want to have some greater clarity over what the end game is. So John Gottman, a person we reference a lot,
mhm,
he's done 40 plus years of research. Highly recommend anything he's written, John Gottman. But he talks about, the fact that you're likely to have relationships with certain topics. Let's bring
mm,
up money because that's a big
yeah,
one.
finances,
So
hmm,
there's finances, in-laws, um,
parenting,
parenting,
and sex.
and sex. So those
Hmm.
are the four areas that people who are married or in intimate relationships have the most arguments about, and the most pointless ones and the most wounding ones. And so if we look at finances, for example, he found that a lot of people have two different approaches to
Mm,
money or relationships with money. One is going to be the person who sees money as a security, and that the more they have in savings and all that, the better they will be. And the other person is going to see it more as freedom, adventure, opportunities.
mhm. And didn't who was the author that talked about when there's somebody makes the money and somebody else is the gatekeeper and keeps
Mm-hmm.
the money? And I would guess the gatekeeper is more the security type,
Yes.
um, you know.
Yes. And so you have these two relationships that are equally valid.
Hmm.
And what happens is, let's say you're the person who's on the saver part of the equation, and your partner wants to buy, let's say he says, I want to get an ATV. We go camping a lot. It would be really fun. I found this good deal, and it's only going to be 20,000 bucks. And you, as the saver, you start to feel your heart rate rise. Your brain starts to go to, oh, we're saving all this money. We're trying, let's say you want to save for a house. That's going to set us back. And then it doesn't stay there. You don't know this because it happens very quickly, but your brain starts to go even further down the road. We'll never have any money. He's going to spend everything we make. We'll end up in our elderhood with no money, living out of our car. That's how quickly. So that's why you get to where you can't think straight, because your brain isn't just saying, gee, I'm not sure we want to spend $20,000. It's
Hmm.
saying, oh my gosh, red alert, red alert, red alert. Your partner, on the other hand, his brain is going to, oh my gosh, we're going to sit here doing nothing our whole lives but
Hmm.
saving money, clipping coupons, being destitute, kind of like those money hoarders that die and they find millions of dollars, secreted in every cranny of their home. And so those two people often hook up together, and they do so because I think they're trying to balance each other out. The person who wants to save on some level doesn't want to just save money and never do anything fun. And the other partner wants to save and doesn't want to be destitute. So they're really not that far apart,
Hmm.
even though as soon as they start to get into these conversations, their brains are taking them to the black and white,
Hmm.
all or nothing. So you have to be aware that your brain is equally susceptible to this. And before you even broach this topic, let's say the topic is, are we going to buy an ATV? You want to make sure that you're in a position to say, well, I want to understand my partner's thinking before I even come to any conclusion about it. What is he observing? What is he thinking? What are his ideas about having an ATV? What does it mean to him? Number one. And number two, is there anything between no and yes? In other words, what are you willing to do? You know, and it's a useful thing to keep in mind. Instead of just saying no, we'll say yes to what you can say yes to, and figure out what you could say yes to.
Yeah. So, yeah, is that let's start budgeting and putting money away for something like that. We're not going to say yes to this great opportunity right now, but let's keep our eyes open for later. You know, when we have enough money and we can say yes.
Yeah.
Then we'll say
or
yes.
can we rent?
Yeah. In the meantime, what do we do? Yeah.
Right.
Sure.
And you know, the argument's always, it's, you know, well, if you buy it, you could put the money you were saving to rent toward, you know. So again, I think the lead in would be, you know, I know you want to buy this ATV. Could you tell me more about how you're seeing that fit into our longer term goal, which is to buy a house? And, you know, what does it represent to you? You know, even that conversation, if you could just keep it at that and not try to get to the decision, that would be useful.
Yeah, if this is a passing thing, it's not really that important, then you don't have to do. If it's really important, it's like, wow, this really means a lot to me, to make a dream board, to put a picture of it on there, and then the other things that would represent what this is.
Right.
Whether that's freedom, whether that's adventure, you know, pictures that represent some things like that. But then to begin a process, okay, how do we get there? Rather than forget it, I'm not into that. We will never do this together.
So leading with curiosity and not, you know, how can I get you to change your mind and co-sign what I want? And it's also not you're co-signing just what they want. You know, it's not a blank check. Understanding doesn't mean agreement, but the effort to understand just in and of itself is something I think most people overlook because they think the whole point is just to solve problems.
Right.
And then they miss the opportunity to get to know the person that they love better and themselves in some ways. So, you know, I think that being curious means that you, for example, if you're confused by what your partner's thinking about doing, that's a good time to ask a question like, I'm confused, and be honest about it, not in a snarky way. I know we had talked about saving money. So how does this fit in with that goal? And what do you think? I don't know. I'm not sure how you think that's going to help us move toward that end and all that stuff.
Well, there's nothing like sitting in an area that's dusty and swatting mosquitoes and not having the things that you like around you brings people together. I don't know. I mean, I'm obviously not the guy who's looking for that kind of adventure, but yeah, not like that. But, you know, we all have our dreams and the things that we want. And the ones that overlap are the things that you do together as a couple. But you just plain can't have everything be in that overlap place. There's going to be some things, and if each time, and if each time your partner wants to do something that's in the outside the overlap category, you're saying, you must not love me, you don't want to spend time with me. It's like, hey, wait a minute, you're welcome to do these things, but you don't want to. How do you allow some freedom here rather than putting the handcuffs on and saying you're my prisoner?
Yeah.
Because you know, that would be the prescription for a divorce at some point. Somebody saying the only way out, to do what I want, to live my life means I can't be with you. Well, and you don't want to set that up.
The effort to be curious, you know, I think is the way that you start a conversation. And if you're not curious, don't have the
Mm,
conversation. If you're
mhm,
upset and scared,
mhm,
you can
mhm.
certainly lead with that. You know, honey, I'm really scared because this has been a big thing for us. We're finally getting our nest egg built. And it sounds like to me you want to take a big chunk of that.
Mhm,
And, you know, he might say, no, 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 I'm going to pay it off. You know, and
mhm,
it's like, okay, well, let's talk about paying off things, you know,
mhm, mhm.
because that's
And
money going out to
yeah, it
that.
is. Mhm,
And, uh, or another topic, so the finances, you know, that's one area of
mhm.
parenting. That even hits, I think, harder in some
Oh,
people.
sure.
That life or death about my child
Mm,
gets, and I don't mean literally. It's just your brain.
mhm,
Again, we're talking about managing your brain, and I think if you're curious, truly, like, gee, I'm not really understanding what my partner's thinking on this. Not in a frustrated way,
mhm,
but in a curious way. Then that means your brain is calm, and that's a good time to have a conversation. Usually we have these, we might start out a little calm, but if we have the goal again, which is we need to be on the same page, and this is something I
mm,
hear a lot with parenting.
mm,
We're not on the same page,
mhm.
and we need to be. And the the thinking goes out the door because it has to do with your offspring and trying to, you know, keep them safe and all these things that go up. But again, the person who is aware that we have some disconnect here, but I'm not quite sure how to account for it. I thought we had agreed that if Johnny doesn't do his homework, that we would take his iPad away.
Mm.
And, you know, the partner might say, well, yeah, but he was really having a hard day, and I just felt like he needed some love. And so I allowed him to have it. And, you know, this is where people go off to the races.
Well, and if you're not hearing the yeah, but you learn to.
Yeah.
And so it's like in a conversation, one discussion, one yeah, but
Hmm.
that's it. Otherwise, you're playing the yeah, but game.
Yeah. And you get more frustrated the
Sure.
more the person does the yeah, but to you. Yeah,
Right.
but I was,
Hmm.
yeah,
Hmm.
but I can't really follow through on that.
So, um, what is the limits and how do we deal with? I just saw a quote by somebody saying, if you take away your child's device, whether iPhone or iPad,
Hmm.
and they throw a fit, they're addicted
Hmm.
to it.
Hmm.
And it's like, what? You're going to feed the addiction?
Hmm.
Is that that's a whole other conversation? Are we doing harm by enabling this?
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
What would stop you from holding on to the iPad prescription and suggesting something else?
mhm, mhm,
You know, you can't have your iPad, but hey, why don't we go to the park
mm, mhm,
if that's an option? Or why
mhm,
don't we take our dog out and play catch with him?
mhm,
Um, in other words, the iPad is being taken away because the agreement was you do your homework, you get your iPad, you didn't do your homework, you decided not to do it. And the decision is then you're not going to have the iPad. Apparently, you didn't want the
mhm,
iPad. And a lot of times, what happens is you'll have a couple where one might agree to something, but they really aren't agreeing. They're agreeing in the short run to avoid a conflict in the short run.
mhm. They're agreeing with if we take it away and the kid is fine, then
Okay.
it's not. But I wasn't counting on this much
Mm-hmm.
uncomfortableness.
Yeah.
He's weeping. He's
Begging, I need
all
my
that stuff that
iPad.
is becoming. Wow, am I damaging my child?
Right.
Is what the question
Over
becomes.
homework.
And so,
Mm-hmm.
being able to call a huddle, a timeout,
Mm-hmm.
not to the kid.
Right.
This is where the parents talk, saying, "Are we concerned that we're damaging our child?
Yes.
What is damage? What kind of damage?
At what point would you be
Yeah.
concerned,
Hmm.
you know, to
Hmm.
ask the question? At what
Yeah.
point would you be concerned that, you know, giving into him when he pitches a fit is going to create a problem?
Yeah. Are we teaching? Are we going to? Are we rewarding a symptom?
Right.
We
We're
don't want to
rewarding,
reward a symptom.
reinforcing the
Hmm.
behavior.
Hmm.
So You can't find that out though without asking a question
Mhm.
and by saying, hey, you agreed to do this, you didn't follow through on it, which is all facts. But at the same time, it creates a defensiveness in the other
Mhm.
person. If you are frustrated, and rightly so, because you thought you had an agreement, it still will be helpful to you to get some time alone to think, maybe write out some
Mm.
questions you have, get some consultation from a professional on some of
Mhm.
these things.
Mhm.
And I will say, though, I have been very impressed with many of my clients who continue to go back to the plate, so to speak,
Mm.
and work to be curious, to be non reactive, when they're being accused of being controlling and all the things that get thrown at them, to be able to say, that's not my intention, this is my position, to hold on, and to say, and I appreciate that you're hearing that as an ultimatum. But the curiosity thing, I think, is where you want to start with,
Mhm.
I'm
Mhm.
not understanding my partner, and not to say what a stupid idiot that person is that they don't see it my way. What's wrong with you?
Mhm.
If you have those thoughts, wait until you can get yourself calm.
Mhm.
Those are all symptoms of an anxious
Mhm.
experience. And continue to work with your significant other, but also anyone else in your family who you have struggles with, and even at work.
Mhm.
These are all good. A good idea is to be curious regardless. And if you'll notice with a good salesman, that's what they do, as you noted, going to the Orange County Fair.
Mhm.
They're doing it maybe to try to sell you something, which is somewhat different. But we all know at the beginning of our time, usually in dating, how wonderful it feels because that person is so curious about us.
Mhm. Mhm.
And
Mhm.
and and how do you maintain that is the
Right.
question.
Yeah.
So, well, I think we've covered the curiosity factor
A little
enough
bit.
for now.
Yeah.
And thank you for listening. Share our video, and we'll look forward to seeing you before too long.
There you go.